All right, good morning. Here from California, 8 o'clock in the morning. I think 11 o'clock on the East Coast. We're going to keep this webinar short and sweet, as we always do. We're going to try to stick to the 25 minutes. Let's make this as interactive as possible. So ask questions if you have questions. Type them into the questions panel in my screen on the right-hand side. But you guys are fairly familiar, I think, with how GoToMeeting works. Today, 3 people on this broadcast. Jan Edelman is joining us. He's a founder and evangelist of Servoy. We've got Sean Devlin on the call. He's one of our most senior technical engineers. Has done a lot of .NET and other modernizations, so he'll share his insight in that. Little introduction to Servoy. We deal with a lot of ISVs, a lot of modernizations, a lot of VB6, .NET, Silverlight, FoxPro, you name it, all kinds of Microsoft technologies that we've helped to modernize. So we're going to talk about that a lot, of course. Today specifically it's going to be about millennials. I wonder actually if it is about millennials or if it's simply about great software and great UX, but we'll figure that out in the webinar. Jan, if you're ready, I think you've got your slides up and running. Go ahead.
Yes, I do.
All right.
Is my sound okay, Ivo?
Yeah, fantastic.
Excellent. That's always good to know that you're not talking into a muted microphone. Right. Welcome to today's webinar that I'll be presenting with Sean. So let's get started. We have a few topics to talk about, and first of all, if we take a step back, I think there's some interesting things going on in the market. When I developed my first business application about 25 years ago, it was easy. As a developer, I dictated how my customer would work, how and in which order they would have to use the software, the business applications that I wrote. But now there is a major shift in the world as millennials enter the stage. These are people that started to use phones and computers from the day they were able to read and write, or sometimes even before that. They have very specific thoughts and ideas about how software should work, and they no longer think that we as developers should dictate how they should work and think, but they think that they should be the centerpiece of action. And that is a major, probably in my experience in the 25 or so years that I've been in this world, the biggest shift that our industry is experiencing. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We've been going through multiple shifts in the software world, starting with mainframe, going to client server, going to browser, and now to mobile devices and to other devices. And the changes are going quicker and quicker, which makes it harder for ISVs to keep up with these changes. If you look at the current business application field, then it is, I think, quite clear that the business applications are behind today's reality. If you look at the statistics, still a lot on desktop, as you can see in this graph here. A lot part is still client server, and only a very small part is already running in the browser. As a platform vendor, we feel this too. We feel the pressure that it is very hard to keep up with all the new developments that are coming out, but we have to, because we deliver a platform to ISVs, so we have to make sure that all the new technologies are being built in so that our customers can keep up with what is coming. So we have to work on the next generation technologies, virtual reality, augmented reality, wearables, natural language, etc. But let's go back to our topic.
Yeah, I think, Jan, we should explore where millennials are in the workforce and how they're exerting pressure and some of the qualities that they have, and how this demographic shift is disrupting business. I think if we first look at how millennials are currently and will in the future exert pressure in the workplace, I think this slide says a lot. You can see clearly that this demographic group is now overtaking the other cohorts, major cohorts in the labor force. And next slide, please. You can see the research shows that this year, in 2016, millennials have become the largest single generation in the U.S., and it's not very different in abroad in Europe. And this has already had a large disruption in the consumer market, but very quickly, as they transition from being not only consumers but also employees at companies, they will be more than just users. They will become increasingly the decision makers for your customers. So, and you can see very quickly, in just 4 years out from now, that they are going to constitute a majority of the U.S. labor force. So certainly they'll be in positions where they're making technology decisions, which applications to purchase, etc. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so I think we should take a look at understanding their qualities and what they bring to the workplace. So first of all, they're hyper social and hyper connected, and this means that they want to have a visible persona within an application or an ecosystem. They expect to interact with their peers and derive a greater sense of meaning from their work through socially engaging at work through applications. They really value freedom. They expect to be liberated by technology, not restricted by it. And they really value having fun in the workplace. The boundaries between work and personal life for a millennial are blurred. They won't do boring things, and they expect that tasks should be meaningful and entertaining. Very easily, millennials are able to dispose of technology that's not fitting their immediate needs. So if it's not good enough, they move on. If it's not immediately understood, they move on. If they find something that's better, they move on, something cheaper. If it goes down, if it doesn't work on my phone, etc. They're very quick to throw out one piece of technology and start using another one. They also expect to service themselves and to get results very quickly. They're not coming from a world where they are reading documentation about how software works. If they need to call support, forget it. The results must come really quickly. Also, millennials expect that applications are personalized to them. So traditionally, applications are more about the system and the task at hand and the data, but millennials expect that their applications they engage with are just as much about them as they are about the other components of their job. But above all else, millennials really value meaningful work experiences. So they expect to derive a greater sense of meaning from interacting with software than the prior generation.
So fortunately, there are patterns to engage millennials in your application, and these are some of them on my screen. And actually, let's dive into a bit more detail on some of these patterns. First of all, if your application is not cloud, browser, mobile, then you're dead unless you take quick steps to address that. And we already see the mobile-first approach in the consumer world, but it's now also made entry into the business world. If you look at even some of the large players like Salesforce, then all of their new development focuses first on mobile, and then eventually they will take it back to the browser, and they don't, and they never did, a desktop application at all. And as millennials will transition into C-level positions, they will choose mobile dashboards and not desktop-based dashboards to monitor their applications, their employees, or the health of their business.
Yeah, and millennials, this generation really expects to be able to bring their own device to the workplace. They didn't come from a world of PCs. They don't remember PCs, let alone mainframe terminals, and they didn't grow up using all-purpose applications like word processors and Office products like the prior generation. So therefore, the idea of an OS-dependent, monolithic, generic ERP application really seems archaic. So to engage the next generation of users, business applications have to be available on a device of the end user's choice, and more we see success where applications are broken up from a monolithic system into a suite of fit-for-purpose tools, because that's how this generation is receiving their consumer applications in apps and not sort of generic all-purpose systems.
Yeah, so another trend is bring your own application, and this is actually very interesting for ISVs because this allows you to write less software. So instead of creating your own help desk software, instead of creating your own front end to software, you can use existing technology for that. For example, and this is just one example that I'm picking here, which applies to ourselves. We use Slack internally as a communication tool, and now if new posts come into our wiki, as you can see in this quick screenshot, they will display in the Slack thread. If support requests come in, they will display here. If downloads come through the system, we will see them over here. So instead of building all these user interfaces ourselves, our engineers simply create REST endpoints, expose that to the outside world, and they can be consumed by different applications, and users can pick their favorite applications to display the information for them. And that allows you to integrate much better all the huge amounts of information that are coming to users today, and they have to process.
Yeah, and because they enjoy the freedom to choose and bring applications and choose their technologies, we see for one specific example that a millennial is going to choose their favorite digital identity and bring it with them to the workplace. So do you think that millennials going to choose a login system where they have to create follow password rules, create security questions and captchas for every application that they use? Or are they going to be used to something that they can just take from one application to the other? And that's more like it for a millennial. They're going to want to bring their own digital identity. So that's a pattern that we're seeing more and more in business applications.
Activity streams. This also fits into the example I gave before, that you can create streams of activities. This obviously changes the classic ISV pattern, which is I call it the master detail pattern, and where you create and design everything as a master detail, customers to orders, orders to order details, etc. And in a stream, you're starting to combine multiple unrelated data sources into a single stream, which is more based on a timeline, and later on, when the information becomes too big, on importance, so that you don't see everything, but only things that are most relevant to you. And you have options in filtering the stream. And these patterns are also starting to come into business applications. I think Salesforce, again, is a good example where they have a social platform tied deeply into the platform that allows users to see activity streams of what is happening in their business.
Yeah, by the way, Jan, I think it's worth mentioning that this generation is used to sub-second performance in all of their consumer applications. Remembering that millennials see technology as disposable and they expect self-service, very fast interactions. This is going to, and we're seeing this already in customers that we've worked with, this is bleeding over into the world of business applications. And if an ERP application or suite of products is not as performant as consumer apps, a millennial won't choose for it. And if it's not intuitive, they won't keep it. And I think a good example is to observe how millennials get their coffee. I work in a town with a major university, and I see them come into the coffee shop, and they've already pre-ordered probably with one click, because the application knows their favorite drink, and they walk in and it's already sitting on the shelf waiting for them, and they grab it and they leave. So that's how they expect business applications to work. And we've seen with our customers that it is possible to deliver large, complex, systems with that kind of performance if it's done with the correct tools. And another area where we're seeing sort of a budding field in the business world is gamification. Remembering that millennials also expect to socialize and have fun as part of their work experience, gamification is a technique that's better engaging users in applications. And traditionally, it's used in fields like education, with students, or customer loyalty programs, mainly consumer applications like personal finance, etc. But more and more, it's a budding field in business applications as well, to engage and incentivize employees, and allowing them to monitor themselves and to challenge against their colleagues, and have more fun at the same time serving the needs of the business better.
Pokemon became a hype in just 2 weeks. Million, and this is very impressive. I've been watching this from the sidelines, and millions of users are now using augmented reality, which before this was just a niche market, and now it's widely adopted, and all of this happened in 2 weeks. So when will business applications start adopting augmented reality? Because it makes a lot of sense in a lot of business cases as well. So looking ahead of upcoming trends, there are many new things happening, new line of business applications that are happening, new generation of user experiences. Some are starting in the business, some are starting in the consumer market. I think augmented reality is a good example that in niche business applications market has already been happening in surgery, for example, but it also has a use case in warehousing, for example. As Servo, we try to keep up with these trends by doing prototypes and concept cars with our customers. We did a Google Glass concept car with one of our customers in 2014, for example. We did a integration with IBM Watson 2 years ago to learn and to see if the use case is already viable and ready to use for business applications.
Yeah, it was last year. We did a prototype for a cognitive computing integrations. The same computer that beat the masters of Jeopardy is now available simply as web services, and this is kind of the world that business applications are moving into, and the ability to leverage all kinds of cloud services, including cognitive computing or AI, whatever you want to call it, is a reality today. Last year we built a prototype using the Watson as a service. We did a chatbot translation help desk, so end users could enter in whatever language was their preferred language. They didn't have to say it. It was automatically detected and translated on the other end for someone reading in their own language, and back and forth they could have a conversation. We also developed a chatbot ordering system, so a person could either with speech or with typing say, I'd like to order a pizza. Okay, how many toppings, or what toppings do you want? What size do you want? A very natural language interface. So we're monitoring these sorts of trends because we do see that it's going to have an impact. We don't quite know where or how, but the point is that the technology is already there, and we can embrace it. So we're pretty excited about that.
All right, so what does this mean for you? I think first of all, and very important, well, modernization cycles used to be pretty slow, like every 5 years, going from mainframe to client server, from MS-DOS to Windows, etc. And these cycles are going to be much faster, and will continue to do so, is my expectation for the foreseeable future. So that means that as an ISV, you have to configure yourself in a much more agile fashion than you used to some years ago. And the bar will be raised even higher on many aspects, particularly on the user experience. So you will have to pick your battles. Are you going to build all these components and functionality yourself, or are you going to work with partners that can help you with the right platform, with the right tools to be able to deliver these things quickly? So developers used to dictate the user experience, and this paradigm has lasted for decades, as I discussed in my introduction slide. And digital natives are not used to this, they don't like this, and they don't accept this kind of business applications anymore. They expect an application to operate on human terms, not humans operating on computer terms. And increasingly, you can select technologies out there. So if you want artificial intelligence in your application, it's not like you have to hire 5 PhDs and develop it from scratch. No, you can simply take IBM Watson as a service, and it's actually very affordable, and implement it in days or weeks within your platform. So although there's more technology, it is readily available as well, but it does mean that you have to keep informed and pick platforms that allow you to stay ahead of your competition. So every day you'll have to look at build or buy. Are you going to build certain technology yourself because they are really your differentiator? What is your added value? And also, how big and deep is your team? Is your team capable of building AI, or should you use technology from an existing provider? And to answer the last question, no, you can't do it all. You will have to pick at what you're good at and work from there. So, with selecting the right tools and platforms, perhaps, and this should be high on the list, you should try to make this your last front-end rewrite, where you select the platforms that are compatible with the future and allow you to stay ahead of your team. Should you have any questions right now, then feel free to post them in the questions channel. We will go through the questions that are appearing right now. And otherwise, you can also reach us by email, or obviously also by phone. The contact details of the presenters are listed on screen for your convenience. So, Ivo, are you seeing any questions coming in the questions channel at the moment?
Yeah, I see. I actually see one, Jan, and that's a pretty good one. I think this is somebody that is actually working with Servoy, because it's a fairly technical one. So the question is, you guys use HTML5 right now, so he's talking about us, and the question is, do you think that that's the last kind of front-end technology that you will use in your platform? And I think that's a very good question, actually, because over the 14 years or 15 years that we've been around, we've helped our customers to go through multiple modernization waves, and we try to help them with that as seamless as possible, so that they don't have to do rewrites and things like that. So yeah, what's the answer to that, Jan? Is HTML5 going to be the last thing?
Well, obviously in today's reality, HTML5 is an answer to many challenges. It allows you to create rich business applications for both browser and mobile, and even desktop nowadays. But this is only the beginning. New iterations of HTML will come out, and don't forget, there's much more than HTML. There's also JavaScript, which is probably even a more significant movement that is also going through major iterations, and there are hundreds of backbone and middleware frameworks out there. So trying to keep up with that is definitely going to be a challenge for ISVs. If yesterday you would have selected Ruby, that would have been the choice. If today you would select Node.js, that would be the choice. Tomorrow there's going to be something else. And that is actually one of the things that we do as a platform provider, is we make sure that our ISVs are up to date without having to follow all the hypes. And yes, that is a huge amount of work for us and our team, but that is the very reason that we exist as a platform provider, because that is the one thing that we focus on making sure that for our ISVs, their rewrite to Servoy is the last rewrite they will ever have to do.
All right. Let me check. No, so that's the only question that I see right now. Jan, if you could switch to the next slide, then I think that's going to finalize our presentation for today. So we'll talk a bit more in depth about user experience next week, August 3rd, same time, 8 o'clock East Coast, 11 o'clock, 8 o'clock West Coast, 11 o'clock East Coast. Now I'm confusing myself. And what is that, 5 p.m. in Amsterdam. So thanks, Sean. Thanks, Jan. And thanks, everybody. Talk to you next week.
Thanks, everybody.